Good morning. Now we will start or continue chapter 8. This is the final and the third part of the chapter. If you remember, chapter 8 again covers trade restrictions and mainly tariffs. Chapter 9 will cover the non-tariff barriers, which is the second group of types of trade restrictions. So we have ended last time by the costs and benefits of imposing 100% ad valorem tariff in a country on a small industry. And we have seen that the net effect is ambiguous. It is not necessarily to be positive or negative. It depends on the difference between the losses of the consumers in terms of their consumer surplus and the gains of the producers in terms of their producer surplus. Again, however, we need to make sure that we understand that this is only the economic view of the issue. It does not take into consideration many non-economic effects and non-economic concerns that we will see and cover at the end of the coming chapter. So today we will continue chapter 8 and we will start by the theory of tariff structures. According to this theory, we will define, measure, and examine the importance of the rate of effective protection. So we have to start by understanding what do we mean by the rate of effective protection. What we have been talking about so far is what we call the nominal tariff rate. This is nominal tariff rate in terms of that it is calculated on the value of the final commodity. This nominal tariff rate is important to consumers because it indicates by how much the price of the final commodity would increase as a result of imposing the tariff, as we have seen last time, where the price increased from $1 per unit to $2. However, the effective tariff rate is important to producers because it indicates how much protection is actually provided to the domestic processor of the importing competing commodity. So the rate of effective protection is calculated on the domestic value added or processing that takes place inside the nation and not on the final product as opposed to the nominal tariff rate. What do we mean by the domestic value added or processing of the product that takes place inside the nation? The domestic value added equals the price of the final commodity minus the cost of the imported inputs going into the production of the commodity.
So, what is the relationship between the rate of effective protection and the nominal tariff rate? We would find that sometimes the rate of effective protection on the final product is higher than or exceeds the nominal tariff on this final product. When would this happen? This would happen if the nation imports the raw materials or the inputs duty-free with no restrictions, or imposes a low tariff rate on the importation of this input than the tariff that it imposes on the importation of the final commodity produced using this input. If this happens, we will find that the rate of effective protection is higher than the nominal tariff rate. Okay, so why would a nation do that? Usually nations do that to encourage domestic processing, domestic production, and hence employment. Because if you increase production, this will increase the demand for labor and hence will lead to employment creation. So for example, if a nation is producing cloth, where here we have the cloth as the final product, and the imported input is wool. If the nation imports wool duty-free with no restrictions whatsoever, but imposes a positive tariff rate on the imports of cloth, which is the final product, then we will find that the nominal tariff on cloth will be less than the rate of effective protection on cloth. However, the nation would do that to stimulate the domestic production of cloth and domestic employment in this industry. Now we will see a numerical example to illustrate and clarify the difference between the nominal and the effective tariff rates. So let's assume again that we have our final product is suits and that the imported material or the imported input used is wool. Let's also assume that the value of the imported wool used to produce one suit is $80. The free trade price of suits is $100, meaning that in the international market, a suit would be sold for $100. If the nation imposes a 10% nominal tariff on each imported suit, this here is the nominal tariff rate, which is 10%. So this means that the domestic price of the suit per unit would be $110. We have $100, which is the international price, plus the $10, which is the 10% nominal tariff rate. This $110, which is the domestic price of the suit inside the country domestically, can be divided into three main parts. The first part is the $80, which represents the value of the imported wool. And we have the $20, which is the domestic value added. This is the difference between the international price of the good, which is the $100, and the value of the imported inputs, which is $80. So we have $20 as the domestic value added per unit. And finally, we have the $10, which is equivalent to the tariff. This $10 tariff collected per suit represents, number one, the 10% nominal tariff rate, since the nominal tariff rate is calculated on the price of the final commodity, which is the $100, the international price of $100 per unit. So it is equal to 10% of the $100. However, it also represents the effective tariff rate. But now, how much is the effective tariff rate? The effective tariff rate is 50%. This $10 represent a 50% as an effective tariff rate. Why? Because as we have mentioned, the effective tariff rate is calculated on the basis of the value added domestically. And we know that the value added domestically per unit of the suit is $20. So now the $10 represent 50% of the $20. So we have 10 divided 20 is 50%. So as you can see here, this is a case where we have the effective tariff rate higher than the nominal tariff rate due to the imposition of a tariff on the final commodity, which is suit, which is higher than the tariff imposed on the imported inputs, because here we have zero tariff on the imported inputs. Even if we have a positive tariff on the imported inputs like 5%, as long as it is lower than the tariff, nominal tariff imposed on the final product, which is 10% in our case here, we will find that the effective tariff rate would be higher than the nominal tariff. So as we have seen in this example, the consumers will only be concerned with the nominal tariff, which is the 10% nominal tariff that led to an increase in the domestic price of the good to 110 as compared to the international free trade price. Because now they are paying a higher price, and this is what they really care about. They would care about how much they are paying for the good and how much there was an increase in the price of the good due to imposing the nominal tariff rate. While on the other hand, for producers, what would they really care about is the rate of effective protection, because from the point of view of producers, the $10 tariffs, as being the 50% of the $20 portion of the suit produced domestically, which is the domestic value added, so to them, this $10 tariff provides a 50% protection of the value of the domestic processing. This represents a much higher degree of protection than the 10% nominal tariff rate seems to indicate. It represents like 5 times more. So this is what really the producers would care about, not the nominal tariff on the final product. So accordingly, it is very obvious that the producers would care about the effective rate of tariff protection and not the nominal tariff rate. This rate would be the most important to stimulating the domestic production of suits in competition with the imported suits. Accordingly, one fact could be realized is that whenever the imported inputs are admitted duty-free to the country or at a lower tariff rate than the one imposed on the final commodity imports, then we will find that the effective rate of protection will be higher than the nominal tariff rate on the final product, and hence this means that we are providing implicitly a higher protection to the domestic producer of this good compared to the explicit nominal tariff rate. In the previous example of suits and wool, we have tried to calculate the rate of effective protection informally. However, luckily, there exists a formula that helps us to calculate the rate of effective protection as follows, where we have G, which is the rate of effective protection, equals to T minus AI TI divided by 1 minus AI, where T is the nominal tariff rate on the final commodity, which was 10% in our previous example. AI is the ratio of the cost of the imported input, which was wool, to the price of the final commodity with no tariff, which is the international price. So this was the cost of wool, which was $80 in our previous example, and the international price with no tariff was $100. And finally, TI is the nominal tariff rate on the imported inputs if it exists. So it would be the nominal tariff rate on the imported wool if it exists. However, in our previous example, this was 0. So let's apply this formula on our example of wool and suits to calculate the rate of effective protection. So in this example, we have T equals to 10%, which was the nominal tariff on the final product, the suit, and we have AI equals to $80 divided by $10, where the $80 is the value of the imported wool, the imported input, and the $100 is the free trade price or the international price of the suit in the international markets. So AI would be equals to 0.8. And finally, we have TI, which is the nominal tariff rate on the imported materials or the imported input wool, which was equal to 0. Hence, G would be equals to 50%, as we have seen in our example. Let's try now to do the same exercise. Let's try to calculate the effective rate of protection, but after changing the nominal tariff rate imposed on the imported inputs of wool. In our previous example, we have the nominal tariff rate imposed on the imported wool as 0. Let's try now to assume a positive nominal tariff rate on the imports of wool, which is equals to 5%. So here we have TI equals to 5%. However, please note that it is still less than the nominal tariff rate imposed on the final product, which is suits, which was equal to 10%. As you can see, this will lead to a new effective rate of protection, which is equals to 30%. So we can see now that the effective rate of protection decreased as we have increased the nominal tariff rate imposed on the imported inputs. So now we have a new G, which is equals to 30%, this is less than the previous G, the previous effective rate of protection, which was 50%. So we can conclude that as we increase the nominal tariff rate imposed on the imports of our inputs, the rate of effective protection would decrease. But as you can see, it is still higher than the nominal tariff rate imposed on the final product of 10%. Now, again, let's do the same exercise again, but after changing TI once more. Instead of having TI, which is the nominal tariff rate on the imported input of wool, from 5%, let it be 10%, which is now equals to the nominal tariff rate on the final product of suits. Again, we will see that the rate of effective protection decreased and it is now equals to 10%, which as you can see is equal to the nominal tariff rate of 10% on the imports of the final product suits. So again, the rate of effective protection decreased as we increased the nominal tariff rate on the imported materials. And now we can see that it is exactly equal to the nominal tariff rate T imposed on the imports of the final product of suits. And now in case 4, let's try to again calculate the effective rate of protection, but using a new nominal tariff rate on the imported materials, which is higher than the nominal tariff rate imposed on the imports of the final commodity. So now we will assume that TI is equal to 20%, which is higher than the T, which is equal to 10. In this case, the rate of effective protection will be equals to negative 30%, which is less than the nominal tariff rate imposed on the final commodity of suits. So as we can see that when we have a nominal tariff rate imposed on the imported inputs higher than the nominal tariff rate imposed on the final product, the effective rate of protection would be negative, yani it would be even less than the T. Based on our 4 cases that we have used to calculate the rate of effective protection, we can conclude what follows regarding the relationship between the rate of effective protection G and the nominal tariff rate T on the final commodity. First, if AI is equal to 0, then G, the effective rate of protection, would be equal to T, which is the nominal tariff rate on the final commodity. This is because when we say AI is equal to 0, it means that there is no imported materials used to produce the final product, and hence AI is equal to 0. Second, for given values of AI and TI, meaning that for constant AI and TI, the effective rate of protection, G, would be larger the greater is the value of the nominal tariff rate on the final commodity, T. Third, for given values of T and TI, the effective rate of protection, G, would be larger the greater is the value of AI. The greater the value of AI means that maybe the greater the value of the imported materials, which is the numerator of AI. Fourth, the value of the effective rate of protection G would be higher than or equal to or smaller than the nominal tariff rate on the final commodity T, as the nominal tariff rate on the imported inputs TI is smaller than, equals to, or larger than the nominal tariff rate on the final product T. These are the 4 cases that we have already seen in our previous examples. So G exceeded T in example 1 and 2, where TI was smaller than T. G, which is the effective rate of protection, was equal to T, which is the nominal tariff rate on the final commodity, in case 3, where TI was equal to T. And finally, in case 4, the effective rate of protection G was less than the nominal tariff rate on the final commodity T when Ti was larger than T. Finally, if Ai times Ti is higher than T, the rate of effective protection would be negative, and this was also the case in case 4 in our example above. I would like to end this part on the rate of effective protection with some remarks and conclusions. So, a tariff on imported inputs, on imported materials like wool in our previous example, is considered like a tax on domestic producers that increases their cost of production and hence reduces the rate of effective protection provided by a given nominal tariff on the final commodity, which was suits in our example, and therefore would discourage domestic production. So, tariff on imported inputs would implicitly discourage domestic production. Clearly, the nominal tariff rate can be very deceptive and does not give even a rough idea of the degree of protection that is actually provided to domestic producers of the import competing product. Second, most industrial countries have what we call a cascading tariff structure. What is the meaning of a cascading tariff structure? It means that the tariff structure is with very low or zero nominal tariffs on raw materials and a higher and higher tariffs the greater is the degree of processing. So the tariff rate increases as the degree of processing of the inputs imported to the country increases. Thus, this tariff escalation makes the rate of effective protection on a final commodity with imported inputs much greater than the nominal tariff rate would indicate. So if we just look at the nominal tariff rate, this would be very misleading to judge the degree of protection provided to the domestic producers of the final product. Finally, a conclusion that I would like to end up this discussion concerning the rate of effective protection with is that the rate of effective protection is definitely much more superior, much more accurate than the nominal tariff rate in estimating the degree of protection actually granted to the domestic producers of the import competing product. So when we judge the degree of protection provided to domestic producers of an imported competing product, we should look for the effective rate of protection and not the nominal tariff imposed on the final product. In the last part that we are going to cover in chapter 8, we need to see how imposing a tariff would affect the returns of the factors of production inside the country that imposed this tariff. This is illustrated by the Stolper-Samuelson theorem. This theorem states that an increase in the relative price of a commodity, for example, due to imposing a tariff on this commodity, raises the returns or earnings of the factors of production that is used intensively in the production of that commodity, which is probably the scarce factor of production in that country. Thus, the real return to the nation's scarce factor of production will increase with the imposition of the tariff. Let's see how would this work. How would imposing a tariff on an imported commodity in a certain country lead to an increase in the earnings of the factor of production that is used intensively in the production of this product? Let's start by reminding ourselves of some of the assumptions of the Heckscher-Ohlin theory that we have covered in chapter 5. If you remember, we have assumed that nation 1 is the labor abundant nation and nation 2 is the capital abundant nation. Good X is the labor intensive good and good Y is the capital intensive commodity. So let's here in our example assume that we have nation 2, which is the capital abundant nation, that imposes an import tariff on its imports of commodity X, which is the labor-intensive commodity. Hence, as we have seen in chapter 8, imposing the tariff on commodity X will result in an increase in the price of X. So we have Px over Py, which is the relative price of commodity X inside nation 2 will increase for both domestic producers and domestic consumers. As a result of imposing that tariff and the increase in the relative price of X, the domestic production of X increases. This means that there will be an increase in the demand for the labor, which is the factor of production that is used intensively in producing X. So the demand for labor will increase. As the demand for labor increases, the price of labor, the rate of return of labor, or the wage rate will increase. Please take into consideration that labor is the scarce factor of production in nation 2, which is capital abundant. So this means that imposing the tariff rate on the imports of X in nation 2 led to an increase in the price, in the return on the earnings of the factor of production which is scarce in nation 2, which is labor. This will be the end of chapter 8. I hope that you have understood everything included in the presentation and that everything is already clear. If anything is unclear or you need further clarification, please don't hesitate to contact me on my email and I would happily answer all your questions. Next lecture, inshallah, we will start chapter 9 that covers the second part of the trade restrictions or the trade policy part, which is the non-tariff barriers. Thank you.